When did you last feel true, genuine fear? What happened? Story 1. Watching my 9-year-old. My daughter's heart stopped the night after her 4th heart surgery. Her pacemaker leads weren't connecting correctly because of all the scar tissue. Telling her to fight and to stay with us. Seeing the exact same fear on my husband's face. Having them escort us out to the waiting room and calling a chaplain to sit with us while they were preparing the room to do emergency open heart surgery at her bedside, trying to read the surgeon's face when he came in to see us after. She needed another heart surgery the next day and she is doing well now, but even thinking about it a year later causes the hair on my neck to stand up again. Story 2. The most acute fear I've felt in my life, that nothing has come close to touching, is when I took a ton of sleep aids, I think Unisum, thinking it would just cumulatively knock me out longer. Instead, I woke up feeling like my brain was short-circuiting. It felt like I was watching myself become permanently brain damaged in real time. My thoughts were skipping on repeat. Oh my God. Realize I'm losing my mind. Realize I already thought that. Oh my God. Realize I'm losing my mind. Realize I already thought that. Oh my God. Reset. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I thought I was going into a locked-in vegetative state, except it wouldn't be dreamlike nothingness, it'd be eternal panic. Story 3. Last year I was snorkeling in Hawaii with my wife and son. Everything's going great, and then I feel a weight start pulling me under the water. My son had taken water into his snorkel and started panicking and pulling me down with him. Now, he was 17 at the time and taller than I am, so imagine an out-of-shape 40-year-old trying to keep 2 grown men afloat and nothing nearby to grab onto. Fortunately, there were some people not too far away, so I only had to struggle for about 5 minutes before we were escorted to safety. But I thought both my son and I were going to drown, and if those folks hadn't been there, we probably would have. When we were brought ashore, I had to lay there for several minutes completely out of breath and unable to move my arms or legs because they had gotten so worn out. Story 4. Several months ago, when I was in my first major car accident, traffic was stopped on the interstate. The semi-truck behind me did not stop. The semi shoved the first car onto the trailer of the truck in front of it. The car flipped into another lane. I heard that initial crash behind me and knew what was coming. Could see in the rear view mirror what was about to happen, but couldn't do anything about it. The semi kept going onto the trailer of the truck, which shoved my car, a compact sedan, into and underneath the SUV in front of me, which hit another truck. I made it out with only bruises, but I don't know if anything will ever compare to hearing the sound of the first crash, seeing the trucks coming for my car, and then being underneath an SUV. It's taken me several months to get to the point where I'm not constantly listening for sounds of impact or terrified of the idea of a semi anywhere near me. Story 5. Financial issues and rising housing prices have pushed me out of my home city to a trailer about 30 to 45 minutes south of it. I got home from work one day, crappy day. I made a stiff drink and popped 1 pill. It was overcast and I could hear thunder in the distance, but no rain or wind, and I didn't think to check the weather. Apparently, there were 2 massive storm cells, one just a smidge north of me, one just south, and I was in a small alley about a mile wide between them. As the gummy is kicking in, every device in the house turns red and starts blaring imminent danger, seek shelter. One of the cells had spun a funnel cloud out of it into that mile-thick alley I was in. I pulled up a radar and saw just how precarious my situation was, and because of the nature of that calm alley, the funnel was perfectly visible right there. A hook of red coming out one cell, about a half-mile away and closing on me. A friend of mine calls. Am I in shelter? No. Can I get to shelter? No. Are you okay? No. Do you want me to stay on the line? Please. Then I heard it, like a semi-truck. I told my friend I didn't know what was about to happen, but that I was going to let him go, in case it was bad, because I didn't want him to hear it if it was. Story 6. A young but big Irish draft horse crushed me up against the door of her stall because she heard a group of other horses passing on the road outside our yard. Near enough, a metric ton of horse crushing my chest against a thick, heavy 100-plus-year-old chunk of oak door. Couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't call out, seriously thought I was going to die. It was totally unexpected. She was new, and because she was generally sweet-tempered, we hadn't yet realized that she had been taught zero manners or respect for human personal space. Fortunately, the horses outside were moving quickly and were out of earshot a few moments later, so she calmed down and let me push her back. That sounds absolutely terrifying. I'm glad you made it out okay. I grew up with horses, and even though I am not afraid, sometimes when a horse doesn't listen or becomes agitated, you realize that this animal is so much more powerful than you are. I still remember the feeling of me, 16 years old, on a very windy day, taking a ride outside in the middle of an open area, field stretching as far as the eye could see. I could feel my horse tense up, ears not turning towards me no matter how much I tried to gently call out. The cold dread that ran down my spine when I realized that if I wanted to run, I was completely helpless. Fortunately, nothing bad happened and I made it home safely, but moments like these happen just often enough to never make me underestimate these animals. Story 7. I heard my mother calling my name from the other room in panic. I thought I forgot to do something to make her angry and went there to see her passed out on the floor face down. She was having a seizure. She got a black eye because she fell down on her face and blood was coming out of his mouth because she bit her tongue hard. Put her in the recovery position, opened her jaws, and put my index finger between her teeth so that she doesn't choke on her own spit. Couldn't reach my phone, so I screamed for my brother and he came down running and called the emergency line. At the hospital, they checked her brain, and after a while, the assistant asked me if she had some traumatic experience recently. Knew then and there it was definitely a tumor in her brain. I was right. After a week of scans and tests, they told us it was meningioma, which is relatively easier to operate on than the other types of tumors. It was 3 centimeters wide, so even if it was relatively easier, it was still very dangerous. It was also right at the time of COVID, so a brain surgery was extra dangerous. Luckily, the operation was successful, and she made a full recovery and only left with a slight dent on her head. I sometimes jokingly ask her if the doctors filled the hole left from the tumor with caulking. I am super happy she is still with us and still has the same sense of humor to laugh with me. Story 8. When my daughter was a newborn, we had to feed her a certain way, or else she would choke. We were trying out new baby bottles, which led to her to start choking on the milk. She began to go blue, and I immediately started back blows to her shoulder blades. She went unresponsive, so I was preparing to start CPR as my husband called an ambulance. A good old sternum rub got her crying, and thankfully she was okay afterwards. Though it was only a few seconds, it felt like forever, and as if I was going to lose my child. Thankfully, we lived next door to a fire station, and they still came out to do a quick assessment of her, though transport to the hospital was no longer necessary. Story 9. Worked in airport security and had to deal with a psychotic episode from a passenger. I've seen people break down before and lose their mind, but never so aggressively. Not fun dealing with someone screaming abuse and threats at me. He was eventually taken away, but it was one of the worst moments of my life. I did not last much longer in that job after. Psychosis is terrifying. My ML had a psychotic break when she found my FL dead one morning. She was absolutely a different person for a while. Normally a king, gentle, perfectly placid, even timid person who never swears. She had a complete, near immediate personality change. She became weird at first, scary weird, sly like. Her presence felt actually intelligently malicious. One day, I was left alone with her. We had been going through to make a photo collection board for the funeral. She started cutting the heads off of her father and relatives and old pictures. Old irreplaceable photos, heavy cardstock photos from the 1930s. Story 10, my 4-year-old wasn't in her bed in the middle of the night. I was frantically running through the house screaming her name and feeling the most intense fear I have ever felt in my entire life. Found her sound asleep, buried under a pile of blankets and pillows on the couch. She made herself a little den in the middle of the night and gave us a horrible scare. We had a long talk about not doing that ever again. Well, we talked in the morning. I spent the rest of the night just sobbing from relief that she was safe. Story 11, I was out wildlife spotting with some friends in Wyoming a few weeks ago. It was a half-mile hike up a steep hill from the car. We were entirely alone, and we'd all had a few seltzers. As we were getting ready to go, someone turned around and said, "There are grizzly bears behind us." We laughed because he said it so calmly. He said, "No, really. Look." It was a mother bear and 2 cubs barreling down the next hill. They were coming right for us. Ivy never ran faster in my life. The whole time I was focused on not tripping down the hill, not throwing up, and not being the last person to the car. In retrospect, we had bear spray, but had completely forgotten about it. Fight or flight, I guess. It was the biggest adrenaline rush of my adult life, though. Story 12. One night, my wife had fallen asleep on the couch with my son, who was 1 at the time. I went upstairs to sleep in our room. I am suddenly woken up by my wife shaking me, screaming my son's name in complete panic. I ran downstairs and I saw him with his back arched completely rigid. I thought he was dead and rigor mortis had already set in. I remember screaming and running up to him to start checking for breathing and a pulse while my wife was calling 911. The most genuine relief was when I saw he was breathing. It ended up being a seizure due to going rapidly from a fever to normal temperatures. Story 13, my first apartment. Somebody was jiggling the bedroom window. I was only living there for 3 days with no furniture. All I had was a mop, clothes, and my mattress on the floor. I broke the mop in half and waited. I didn't even think to give a warning. Dude was just stealing my screen for his own window. He thought my apartment was still empty. He had to destroy it because he locked his keys inside. I gotta say, he was gonna get it if he got in. No smartphones back then. I was scared, crapless. It happened at night. I was in my underwear. Story 14. It was 3:30 a.m. I was up watching a show in the dark. I live in a studio, so my front door is like 7 feet from me. I hear metal on my screen door and rattling outside, like someone trying to get in. I sit in fear for a sec and think, I don't want to die. Bolt up, grab my hammer conveniently on my coffee table, turn all the lights on and the porch light on and yell hey, cause that's all I could manage. I stand by the door with my hammer in my hands, silent tears, legs shaking, wearing just a big shirt, heart beating out of my chest. The Ring camera wasn't working. I text my family and my ex about what is happening, considering telling them I love them. It's silent. I sit on my bed, still crying, still shaking, facing the door. My neighbor texted me, he's so sorry. He was looking for his spare key. Story 15, I'm a teacher, and along with fire drills and tornado drills, We also have lockdown drills, that is active drills. One day my team and I were in a meeting, and our classes were outside on the playground with the aides. The assistant principal had her laptop open in front of her and would occasionally glance at it. She was obsessive about watching the cameras, so this was normal to us. She glanced at the laptop, did a double take and said, "What the?" then jumped to her feet and ran out of the room. Of course, we immediately got up and went to her laptop, but before we could see what she had seen, she shoves the door open and says, "Get your kids, this is not a drill." We bolted out of the building, yelling at our kids to line up. We got them into the gym, the closest secure location, locked and barricaded all the doors, and then waited. Easily the longest 2 hours of my life. We heard police sirens at one point, but no gunshots, thank God. We were getting updates from other teachers in the building, as well as Facebook of all stupid things. Finally, the lockdown was released, and since it was nearly 3 anyways, and the majority of parents were at the school, we just let everyone go home. Some stupid 5th graders, I teach kinder by the way at a Prec 5 elementary school, had decided to bring guns to school. They had a freaking notebook with all the details. The AP had seen one of them with a gun in the hallway. We never teased her about watching the cameras ever again. Story 16, Midtown Manhattan, sometime in 2007. People were screaming and running away from something. Cars were making U-turns on 3rd Avenue. It was a one-way street. I saw smoke rising up from a block away and remember thinking, oh God, not again. It was my first day working in New York City. The fear in that moment was insane, like a cold, slimy thing snaking up and grasping my heart. I too started running while frantically trying to call my roommate who was at home to find out what was happening. He confirmed it was a steam pipe explosion on Madison or Lexington Avenue. Can't remember exactly anymore. As soon as I heard it, the cold hold on my heart disappeared. Story 17, I have been very sick. My body creates scar tissue and it creates a great deal on my lungs and small intestine. I could not eat for 3 years, just surviving off of IVF. I have had 3 major surgeries and been intubated for 7 months. I have autism, I'm claustrophobic, afraid of needles, anxiety, ADHD, depression, and synesthesia. This whole journey has been constantly doing things that terrify me. A part of my autism is that I don't like things on my face. Hospitals are not autism friendly. Aside from the times I thought I was dying, I thought I was in a time loop. I thought I saw the shape of light, and I thought I saw other people dying. I saw my dead relatives, friends, and teachers. Welcome to synesthesia, where I think and feel in color and pictures. This journey has been hell, one terrifying moment after another. All of this started when we were trying to start a family. Now I don't even know if it's possible. Another major fear of mine, never being able to be a parent. Story 18, told this one a different thread a couple months ago. I got into an Uber. He had his hood up, didn't look at me, and didn't say a word. As soon as my door closed, he took off. He asked me where I lived and how to get there. I told him to follow Uber Maps. He asked again. He was driving erratically and running stop signs, so I told him to turn onto the street we were riding parallel to. He passed multiple turns, blatantly ignoring me. He asked me if I had a music preference, and I said no. He picked a song and turned the volume to max, not just a little loud, all the way up. He opened his console and reached in, sprayed cologne on himself, then offered me gum, taking a piece for himself. I politely declined. He started reaching all around the back seat, saying he dropped his piece. I never saw him drop anything. The song blaring was saying, "Is there anyone out there? 'Cause it's getting harder and harder to breathe." Mind you, he picked this song, it wasn't the radio. There was a UPS truck blocking the one-way street. Knowing this may be my only chance to exit the vehicle, I quietly unbuckled with one hand and the other was on the door handle. As we approached and he was forced to slow down to a stop, I dipped and sped, walked the other way. It really felt like he was getting ready for something. To rob me, attack me, I don't really know, but I had a horrible feeling. Was the music maxed out so nobody could hear me? I've never heard my gut so loud in my head repeating over and over. Get out. Story 19. This is lighter than most of the other responses, but it was recent. We took a trip to Alaska last month and were hiking in the snow in Denali Park. We were on a section of the mountain that has thick scrub and trees on each side of the trail. It was quiet and peaceful. We could hear footsteps crunching in the snow and our breathing in the snow falling. Then we heard a growl, close. It sounded like it was only several yards into the brush. My heart stopped, and adrenaline rushed through me. I was sure it was a bear, and it was close and hunting us. We had bear spray. I started talking really loud, making noise, clapping my hands, asking my partner if we should run down the mountain. I was in total fight-or-flight mode. He took me seriously, and we hiked and ran a bit up the trail while looking back. I asked him why he wasn't terrified. He said, "It startled me, but I don't think that caribou is going to chase and end us." It was a caribou. It was a loud snoreful, not a growl. It came out of the brush and crossed the trail below us. Beautiful. Story 20. I was being taken into theater for my 6th surgery in a year a few months ago. They were prepping me and about to put my cannula in for anesthetic, and the theater doors opened in front of me when someone came into the pre-op room. I don't know why, but the sight of the cold, sterile room and the metal operating table and equipment with the big lights completely freaked me out. I was terrified by it, and I now have to be sedated before being taken for operations. I've probably got some kind of subconscious PTSD or something from multiple rough surgeries so close together, but the thought of that cold, harsh light and the metal table makes me feel sick with fear. Story 21. I was at my friend's house. He was not a nice person. He would abuse me every way possible. I was sitting on his bed watching him play with his VR. He took it off and wanted to show me something. I thought it would be something like weed or maybe a new video game. He pulled out a gun and pointed it towards me. My blood ran cold and I thought, this is it. This is how I'm going to die. My parents are going to get a phone call that their child is dead. He pulled the trigger and a flame came out. It was a lighter. He laughed at my reaction, and all I could think was, what the hell is wrong with this kid? Story 22. When I was in flight school, I brought my grandfather out one day to watch me fly and explain how everything worked. It was a windy day where most students and instructors either stayed on the ground or headed to a different airport, but my instructor and I decided we were going to send it. My solo was coming up, and my mindset was basically, if I can handle ugly weather, I'll be fine on a calm day. So we went up while my grandfather stood on the ramp watching. The first few landings went great, but on the last one as I am coming into land, I hit a wind shear right before the runway. For anyone who doesn't know, wind shear is when the wind suddenly changes speed or direction instantly. If it shifts against you while you are descending, it can rob the wings of lift and make the airplane sink faster than expected, even if your airspeed looks normal. At this airport, there are trees just before the runway, and as I'm on short final, I suddenly noticed those trees getting real big real fast, and I was just confused and felt a big pit in my stomach. I could barely hear my instructor telling me frantically to add power. I did, and we made it over the trees. made me second guess my dream job entirely. Story 23. The one time that I felt true, unfiltered fear was when I was attacked by a brown bear. Happened 9 years ago in BC. I was hunting as I usually do. Made a very rookie mistake and traveled Unsee River through thick alder brush. Went around the corner and spooked a bear. She charged and knocked me on my back. I've never felt true panic like I did at that moment. It's like my brain went back to being a scared little kid. I immediately rolled over and put my hands over the back of my neck. The bear turned around and started biting into my thighs and butt. The real fear came when it ripped into my shoulder and right arm. I remember seeing her face when she was gnawing on my shoulder. She had blood dripping on her chin and her eyes looked directly into mine. I completely understand the phrase blood ran cold, to say the least. All in all, the attack lasted maybe 30 seconds. I still have nightmares about it to this day. I even had one a few nights ago. I still get phantom pains in my right arm where a pretty bad scar is. Isn't as bad as some people's on here. Yikes. But it was still scary for me. Story 24. When I was in high school, there was a custody battle over my younger sibling. My mother lost and she drove me home. She was going 70 plus miles per hour on extremely curvy and hilly streets. At this time, I was in driver's ed, and we were at the point where we were watching videos of people driving recklessly and getting in accidents with them, ending up with their brains scattered across the road. I had convinced myself that I was going to die that day. It scared me so bad all of my hair fell out the next few days and never grew back. Not as scary as some of the stories here, but I thought I'd share so people can see what fear can do to you physically. Story 25. When I was growing up, my dad lived in the middle of nowhere on a reservation, 20 miles to either of the bordering towns. My room at the time was a converted ex-living room, so it had a boarded-up main entry. We were poor. The room had a giant window next to the boarded-up door. One night I woke up to doorknob twisting and turning. It started slowly, but then the boarded-up door started to be pulled against the frame vigorously. I froze in fear for hours. I'm grateful every day for the 2x4s across the frame because it eventually stopped, but I never saw anyone peeking in. Let me reiterate here that we were in the middle of nowhere. Since I grew up on the res, I am superstitious, but I still to this day don't to know if I'm more afraid of cryptids or man. Story 26. When my daughter S middle school called, because she suddenly couldn't move her arms or legs. Thankfully I lived close and was there to pick her up in 5 minutes. They wheeled her into my car in a wheelchair, and I took her straight to the ER. After all the assessments and MRIs, she just wanted to take a nap. When she woke up, she was back to normal. They figured it was a seizure. She has had a few migraines, no seizures since then with similar effects, but milder. A migraine rescue triptan fixes it. I also get frequent migraines and take seizure medicine to control them, but have never experienced full body paralysis like I saw with her. Story 27. Last February, driving home from work in horrid icy conditions because the RTO was forced on me, my car lost traction on black ice. When you're in a car, a multi-ton vehicle, and it just starts moving in unexpected ways that you can't really control, yeah, you're at a higher power's mercy at that point. Nearly collided with the speed limit sign, but fortunately, the car just slid off the side of the freeway partially, and a cop happened to come alongside not long after to summon a tow. The rest of that drive, however, was terrifying. Whiteout conditions, semis on roads that had clearly been plowed not long ago, but were already building up to the point of losing traction, and the sun had long gone down. I was lucky that the worst that happened in the end was losing a few hours on commute and a 3-digit record fee, but it's also a major reason why I refuse to ever have that long of a commute again. Not worth risking life and limb because of some idiot management who I don't work for anymore because of even stupider reasons that is already paid off in delicious karma. Story 28. Overcooked. A blind decreasing radius right. Hander turned on my motorcycle on a road through dense forest. I was carried right into the oncoming lane at 60 miles per hour. I knew I was going to die then and there. Not worried about possibly dying, I knew my luck had finally run out and I was going to die. I almost passed out on my motorcycle with tunnel vision and everything, but there was no vehicle in sight in the oncoming lane. I have barely ridden my bike since then. It was an utterly terrifying experience. Story 29. It was the 4th of July, and my boyfriend and I were out cruising on the motorcycle all day. We ended up near a bigger city around firework time, so we decided to stop and walk to where they were being lit. I typically have really bad anxiety and feel uncomfortable in crowds, so the feeling I was getting wasn't exactly out of the ordinary. We found ourselves in the middle of a crowded bridge. The view was incredible. Right before the grand finale, we had decided to try and head back to where we were parked to beat the crowd. Right as we got to the edge of the bridge, we heard someone shout, "Gun!" Within seconds, as fireworks were still going off, the entire crowd in front had turned to face us and started to stampede. I got shoved to the ground and trampled. There was no time for me to react. My boyfriend reached down to the bottom of the dog pile and grabbed my arm, pulled me from my doom, and rushed me to safety. What lasted maybe 7 to 8 minutes felt like hours. The entire time this was happening, all I could hear was kids screaming and booms. I truly had no idea if I was going to make it out alive.